So welcome back, everybody, to episode 9 of the all-new, although not that all-new these days, We Love Ugly Data, Deep Analysis podcast. I've got Alan with me again this time. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
For those of you who are new to it, or those of you who've come before but like this bit, part of the format is explain the format, and this is the format. We have 3 topics. We have 30 minutes to discuss them in. It's roughly about 10 minutes a topic, but, you know, a little bit of give and take. This episode is quite Microsoft heavy. We make no apologies for that. As Alan has pointed out several times in writing recently, they're quite a big organization, and they've just come through a bunch of interesting product announcements, one of which is SharePoint Premium.
Yeah. So I've spent quite a bit of time with Microsoft in strange ways over the last sort of month or so. Visited the Power Platform show in a huge show in Vegas. And then I was invited to speak and spend time at the basically their partner launch, right? Pre-Ignite in Seattle. So I spent the best part of a week there. And this is where I first heard of SharePoint Premium. And, you know, what is SharePoint Premium? Well, it's SharePoint that's a bit better or more expensive. Actually, you know, naming conventions aside, you know, we'll leave that to Microsoft's marketing team. You know, whether that's a great name or not, I don't know. But it is a big shift. So in other words, it's much more than adding the word premium to SharePoint.
But this isn't something which is suddenly blown out of nowhere, is it? This is something that they've been building up to almost as a piece of parallel development for a few years.
Yeah, well, it makes sense is the point, right? So you had this whole parallel world, or seemingly parallel world, of Syntex, and prior to that, Cortex, and which is basically all the modern fancy new stuff, generating, you know, and using machine learning and AI and it's all the cool stuff, basically, right?
Yes.
And it ran alongside SharePoint in most people's minds. The reality is it was an upgrade to SharePoint. That's what it was. And so SharePoint Premium basically brings those two worlds together into one package. And it makes a huge amount of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for Microsoft, but more importantly, it makes a lot of sense for the partners and customers, right? Because I think with any of these things, you know, you said Microsoft's a big company. It's an absolutely humongously big company. And with that comes a humongously big list of features, functions, products. It's dizzying, right? So the fact that they're pulling it all together and saying, look, if you buy SharePoint Premium, you get the lot, makes sense. So yeah, is it content service? Is it document management? Yeah, it's all of that stuff. That's what.
So it's all the stuff that SharePoint did before, but a lot more.
Exactly. And a lot more. Now, Microsoft would probably disagree with this, but that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. They're not here. So
they're not.
Can't interrupt us.
So for me, in the long term, the pivot point here, the important pivot point with Syntex, though it was technically sort of there in the SharePoint, is the use of things like a knowledge graph, right? So in other words, now we can integrate things together. We can start making sense of this big sprawling mess that we probably have, like most organizations do. We can start saying, oh, this data set's really good and useful, and maybe we could start you know, automating some of that or using machine learning on it. And so no, it's good. It's a big step forward for them. I think with all of these things, you know, we'll see how it works out, because for all Microsoft is absolutely humongous and they absolutely do completely dominate our sector, whether you like that or not, it's how it is. What you find with a company, well, let's just say what you find with Microsoft is how are their partners going to work with this, right? Because those are the big deals, right? So,
and some of the people you were with while you were at one of your visits was with the partners, so that must be an interesting perspective.
And actually, I assume I mean there was an awful lot of partners online joining that, but the ones in the room obviously were tended to be the bigger ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, they seem to be like, oh, thank goodness. Like, that's good.
So was it thank goodness that there's something new to do projects with, or thank goodness this resolves some of the issues that we've had with it since 2001?
If I'm being perfectly well, that's a good question. I think it's two things. One, yes, it provides tools to help resolve some of the issues. Now, some of the issues are because it's been so damn popular.
Yeah.
Right. So, oh, that's great. Oh, well, oh, look, we've got 10,000 of them now. Oh, look, we've got 20,000 SharePoint instances. So, yes, there are tools there now to help start make sense of and manage that sprawl. That's a win. That's a positive thing. But secondly, this is just going to be much easier to explain to customers, right? It's like, oh yeah, we've got SharePoint Premium, so we can do this now, we can do this now, we can do this. Whereas before, it was almost like going in and saying, well, we could do this if we now buy this, right? It just added a layer of unnecessary complexity to new projects, to new deals, even to existing customers, right? So now it's just, this is all SharePoint. Yeah, we can do that with SharePoint. So it's pragmatic in the sense that it just simplifies things. But actually, yes, under the covers, there is a lot here that is going to, or has the potential, at least in the right hands, to start making sense of what is a mind-blowingly massive customer base, number of installs, and by definition, staggering amount of information. I think we might have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but estimates are 2 to 3 billion new files a day going into M365. And off the record, various people have said to me,
this is very much on the record.
That's why I'm being careful. But off the record, more than one person has said, look, that's a best guess. Truthfully, it's probably higher than that. I mean, just think about that every day. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a step towards like managing content at truly massive scales, which original document management systems, including SharePoint, were never designed to do.
Yeah, and it seems that actually, even though I'm sure we have our opinions about using the term premium in relation as a marketing term here, it's not just SharePoint that's getting a premium. There is actually a Teams premium, for argument's sake, as well, going on right now. So it seems to be a moniker as each of the large constituent parts of the Office with a lowercase o collection of Microsoft products, which is SharePoint 365 et al., all seem to be gradually making more use of the Project Cortex stuff.
Correct, because to be fair, I keep using the phrase "makes sense." Basically, what's happened is over the last, 3 years, and I guess it really started a bit before that.
Well, Graph was 2015. So
Graph's been around a long time, but the Cortex syntax stuff, it's sort of been gradually rolling out. But the reality is, that's been essentially a beta, right? Let's test. Let's see what works. Let's see what doesn't. Okay, well, it's tested. We know what works. We know what doesn't. Doesn't mean there isn't more coming in the future. But now it's ready for prime time, right? So let's just bundle it in and get people using it at scale.
And I guess for the partners who were in the room last time, then there's going to be at least some kind of managed migration over time into premium that is going to be at least some projects for them, given the sprawl of most organizations. SharePoint
I think it's less about migrating into anything. I think it's more about tidying up what's already there. Because that's a big challenge. I mean, that is a big challenge, right? I mean, I'm going to be honest, I didn't know this. I do now. There are some large Microsoft customers who have over 100,000 SharePoint installs, right? Wow. So who cares about migrating? Who cares about buying something new? It's like, whoa, I need to bring some order to this.
Yeah,
I need to get a grasp on. And by the way, in commercial terms, those are big projects.
Yeah. So just to move it a little bit on, and just for those of people who can see the screen or don't, obviously these have both been. This has been blogged about by you. What's also been blogged about is the kind of larger set of announcements around Microsoft Ignite. Which was not just SharePoint. And in fact, if you were looking at the keynote and look at the headlines, you'd be forgiven for thinking the SharePoint was even there at all, let alone the fact it was quite a big announcement for a big new product line. Ewan did in a separate blog here, which again, all this will all, as ever, in the show notes for those of you who are new, so you don't have to worry about writing stuff down or looking while you're listening. We'll put those in there for you. There was a bunch of other stuff around Ignite, around document management again, which you've also blogged about. Any highlights you want to think that people should pay attention specifically on that before we get to Copilot?
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it, Copilot? But, so Copilot was left, right, and centre. You'd think that was all Ignite was about.
Of course.
Actually, that was not the case in reality. That was how they marketed it. That was got the headlines, and rightly so. I mean,
yeah.
Why wouldn't you? But I mean, now I'm going to be honest. I didn't personally count these, so who knows? But there was over 100 announcements at Ignite.
Wow.
Right? Yes, it's Microsoft, but even so, that's a lot, right? And again, if I contrast the announcements at Ignite, the people we've spoken to, and my time with the partners, you know, what's really grabbing a lot of their attention, I think will play out in the coming year, is what we might call a return to document management, right? It doesn't mean selling new document management systems and licenses. I'm sure there's plenty of vendors wish it did. It's about the practice and the skills, right? So, which is how we now feed into the whole AI Copilot stuff. But basically, it's such a cliche, and I really don't like using it, but I'm going to. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Great. Okay, you've got a terabyte or a petabyte or more's worth of insurance-related data, healthcare. Fantastic. Okay. Well, you're just going to point AI at it and try and make sense of it? No, because it's a mess. Like, we don't know what's in there. We don't know what's accurate. We don't know any of that stuff. So, guess what? Those good old document management skills, those library sciences skills, right, of actually managing the life cycle of content. Imagine that. Separating the dross, you know, the wheat from the chaff, whatever we want to call it. Those skills are going to be in high demand. Yeah. Right? Because we all know wherever we stand on the ethics, the morals, the responsibility arguments, it doesn't matter. AI actually works, and it works really, really well if it's got good data.
So let's get into that then. Let's move off SharePoint Premium, and we're talking to Copilots everywhere, which was kind of the theme if you were following the Copilot stuff. But first of all, just for those people who are listening or watching, we're recording this on the 22nd of November, which means we are into currently CEO appointment number 4 of the last 5 days at OpenAI. We're not going to cover that specifically, but there is a blog that Alan's written on what do we care about within the OpenAI shenanigans, and why do you want to go to? But I want to make sure that we, I had that line in the sand that 1, we have written about it, and 2, we're on the 22nd. How many CEOs will there be by the time you listen to it? Have a guess. But if we get a little bit onto Copilot itself.
Your microphone's muted, Mike. Your microphone's muted.
There we go. Sorry, my microphone, my docking station just failed. So we'll probably leave this one in because we don't have any.
Oh, it's fine. Hey, it shows we're doing it for real.
So we're doing it for real. So there were a large number of Copilot announcements, which we'll come on to a little bit about why that kind of data issue is there. But obviously, prior to all of the shenanigans going on at OpenAI, Copilot was a very big part of Ignite. And it's something that Microsoft, I mean, they started it around GitHub 18 months ago, but really it's only come to the fore really around sort of 365 and Dynamics and Power Platform. But basically the idea that there was a Copilot for every Microsoft Cloud experience was something that was repeated, you know, in every individual product keynote.
And again, I mean, yes, we've written about it, but it's a simple point, but it's an important point, right? Why is it called Copilot, right? Because this is not here to replace your job. Now, I'm the person, by the way, who for years has been saying, no, actually, AI is coming for your job. And I'm not backing away from that statement either, right? But for much of the work in the world of information management, it can't do your job. It can help you, it can assist you, right? It can do some things faster and quicker than you could before. But that's the key thing here with Copilot. It is, I'm not going to say clippy, but it is a new assistant, a much smarter one. But
and ironically, when people talk about the next generation, I don't mean AGI, I mean sort of the next generation of Copilot, they're looking at something that's more proactive. And actually, the proactive thing is much more like Clippy. It looks like you're doing something, can I help with it? Which is for now something which is very much elective on the side of the user, on the side of the workforce, to say, hey, I think I need help at this point. Let's opt into it. And that kind of conversational side is still something which you as a user are supposed to say, well, I want to opt into having that conversation now as either functionally around an application or logically around a role. And these are different Copilots that sort of existing within, not just within Microsoft, in lots of other vendors lineups, and helpfully they're virtually all calling them Copilot as well, which makes it very easy to remember the product names. But looking specifically at Microsoft, you've got the sort of 365 Dynamics ones, but then you've got those for sales, those for service, those for Power Platforms, which are much more sort of functional. And they're now moving into the idea, and this is where we get back to our kind of data thing, which is, hey, build your own Copilots. Take what you know about your organization or your domain, or probably a combination of those two. You use the framework that we've given you, and one of the announcements here was what they're referring to as Copilot Studio. Again, we've talked about something similarly in the past that Salesforce have done. Its name I can't remember, but it's something like Einstein Studio, that allows you again to take a foundation model, to create a kind of separate knowledge base, if you like, so that the knowledge base itself can help interpret the questions, and then you use the conversational smarts that come from the foundation model to help you kind of package it. I mean, I know Google did something. In fact, in the very first episode 1 or episode 2 of this podcast, we talked about Google's first sort of move towards that last April. So it's not a new idea, but for organizations who are big 365 customers or big SharePoint customers, or for likelihood both, they're walking around with enormous knowledge bases of information to start with, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the tooling's great. I mean, it is. I mean, it is, hands down. It is. I think what everybody that nobody's marketing or shouting from the rooftops, but everybody knows comes back to what I was saying, right? You got to sort the data out, and that's a big job, but it's also a huge opportunity moving forward. But I think there's other things there with the whole conversational AI. I mean, one of the little, well, it's not little, but it completely got lost at Ignite, I think, was, now sort of bi-directional support for over 100 languages.
Yeah.
Now think about that, right? So I could be working on a contract in English with my German colleague who's working on a German version of it, and we're conversing and we're conversing fluently between two languages. Now, I'm not saying that's all perfect, but you can see where things are going. There's a lot of things that could be done here. There's a lot of things that could be explored. It has a lot of potential.
One of the things I think that, I mean, we've talked about it previously, and I blogged about it recently for those up on the screen, is a AI generated photograph of or an AI generated image of a cat that I did using the Bing image generator. What we're finding now is a lot more discussion around the brass tacks of what this means to organizations on a day-to-day basis, rather than, well, hey, wow, look what it can do, kind of speculative stuff we're looking at earlier in the year. It'd be nice, actually, at a kind of international level, at a government level, if our respective governments were perhaps looking a little bit more practically, rather than thinking about how Gen AI is going to create chemical weapons or turn us all into paper clips. But hopefully that track will die down as political expediency moves on, and we can focus a lot more onto kind of the practicalities of day-to-day work and the practicalities of how this inevitably is going to form a significant part of all product lines moving forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, so we've been giving a lot of praise to Microsoft here, and fair dues, right? They dominate the market and they come out with a lot of good stuff. It takes, I mean, this is one thing you learn though as an industry analyst, right? I learned it the hard way a long time ago, right? And by the way, I think we relearn it every year with the predictions, right? What we think is going to be big next year is probably going to be big in 2 or 3 years' time, and what we think will be massive in 5 years' time is probably going to take 10. For all the crazy excitement and announcements at Salesforce and Dreamforce and Ignite and whatever, it takes years for this stuff to actually really gain a grip, right? So, but that's good, because you know what, it needs to be tested and figured out. So yeah, there's going to be co-pilots everywhere. I not necessarily just Microsoft's, but some version of everywhere. That I'm not in disagreement with. But the fact that it's cool isn't good enough, right? What value does this actually bring? And there's been very little work done around that so far. Yeah,
and I think that's, I mean, we'll I think, unsurprisingly, when we get to our predictions show next month, which we're recording actually in a couple of weeks' time, one of those is likely to be around, it's going to be a bit of a cold, dark winter for AI, for AI, particularly Gen AI, until you can find not the killer app, but the way in which it plugs into processes and procedures and ways of working which are established and understood. That's really where it starts to get that generation.
And again, it's not just industry analysts. I mean, we've talked about this many times, and I always try to be very cognizant of it. We live in a bubble, right? We live in a tech bubble. You can call it the Silicon Valley bubble, whatever bubble you want to call it. But outside of it, most of the world doesn't care. You've got to make them care. So that takes time.
So let's step outside our bubble and talk about a little bit of research. You may remember, for those of you who are regular listeners, and bless you all for doing that, that we were encouraging you vigorously to go and fill in a piece of quick research we were doing a few months ago on the extent of use of citizen developer tools, low-code, no-code tools, and how they were working inside your organization or not. It wasn't meant to be like the world's most expansive survey, but just to give us some indicative understanding of how that's going on. And we promised you, if you filled them in, that we give you the results. Now, if you didn't fill them in, you have to put your fingers in your ears at this point. You're not allowed to know the next bits. It's only for those of you who filled it in, gather around a little bit closer so you can hear. We're not going to give you all of the data. We're going to give you some of the headlines, because I think actually they're probably the most interesting bits. We picked up two little ones for this. Two that aren't that surprising, and two which are kind of interesting, at least interesting to us. So the term citizen developer, this is probably for the marketers listening. The term citizen developer is pretty well known. Most of us, respondents, not going to give you the precise numbers, but most respondents knew what a citizen developer was, knew what the term was, were familiar with it, didn't have to ask what it was, knew what that meant. That's good, because if you're already using the term inside your marketing, that's great. If you're not sure whether you should, it's probably okay now. We've gone past the point now where that's now a general term. Secondarily, most organizations who responded they were using tools were using low-code and no-code tools that came from their predominant application providers. So if we refer back to the vendor who we've been talking about a lot during this podcast, a significant proportion of people were using their tools because they use their tools elsewhere. If you were using, big application pieces from another vendor, it's likely that you were using their tools. Now, that's kind of interesting from what that means to standalone vendors, but it means at least the path of least resistance so far for low-code and no-code tools has been, hey, the applications we've already got, how can we make them work a bit better? How can we encourage more people to take a stake in improving them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things as well. I mean, like 2 years ago, 2 years ago, I guess, two full years ago, everybody was talking about citizen developers. Every briefing we had from every vendor was telling us, Actually, you don't hear it as often now, do you?
No.
And similarly, oh, we're low code, we're no code, we're no scripting. That was the other one that never caught on. But whatever. And well, it's just a given now, isn't it? People expect that.
Yep.
Well, if it's not simple, I ain't doing it. So I think it was a sort of craze that came and went quickly in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of practicalities, I guess it's fair to say development has always been getting simpler and simpler in terms of the user interface. It's right, you know. I mean, you're not looking at a green screen anymore. So
no. My days are sat in front of a 3270 terminal quite a long time ago. So yes.
So you know, so there's that, but yeah, but there
the
are
interesting disconnect, and again, it depends whether you think of the idea of governance being interesting, but it's important. Even if you don't think it's interesting, I think you'd have to admit it's important. So right. Those people who said, look, hey, we're not using these tools, if you look at the biggest reason, the overwhelming reason why they are not using it is they have concerns over control and governance, right? Which is interesting in itself. But if you look at those who are, most organizations who are using the tools have no formal management for government in place in their organization, right? So we kind of almost got like one proof point and the other proof point that sort of are working together here. The organizations who care about governance care about governance. Those who don't care about governance are the ones most likely to use the tools. Now, that's not to say that you can't use citizen development tools in a well-governed environment. In fact, if you talk to the vendors who sell these tools, they make an enormous stall in actually you can do it and it's how you can do it. What it seems to be is that it's not getting through to the people who really care about it, and the people who don't care about it don't use it.
Yeah, and I think it's one. So just to pick up the thread, I mean, I think one thing, whether we call it citizens, developers, no code, whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact is, developing applications is essentially becoming easier and easier and easier to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so the demographic, if we can call it that, of people who are able to develop them it grows broader. But at the same time, there are genuine concerns here, right? Because you can develop something that looks great and it's making you happy and it's checking every bell and whistle. You think you're the God's gift. Mm-hmm. It could be causing chaos somewhere else in your organization. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That is the very real danger, right? So, we did hear earlier this year on, it doesn't matter how we heard it, but anyway, a couple of big systems integrators basically saying, now we're talking about specific vendors who touting no code citizen development thing. Yeah. No, it's not getting traction because certainly in regulated industries, and you could argue all industries are regulated, but heavily regulated industries, the fear of what could be unleashed. It's like, phantom apps running left, right, and center, pulling data from left, right, and center, updating data that shouldn't be updating. They're very worried about it. So I think that whole thing around citizens, developers, governance, control, increasingly as we're now moving into a machine learning and AI first world, right? We used to say mobile first, right? Now it's AI first, isn't it? I think there's very real concerns there. I do, but to the second point you were making, most organizations who use the tools have no formal management or governance. Isn't it sad that we could probably have predicted that?
No, absolutely, and I think that's there's always something reassuring when you get survey results and you look at it and go, yep, that's kind of what we expected. You really want something that's super surprising because that would be a wonderful headline for writing it up, but actually beforehand you would have gone, you know what?
Yeah. I know. I mean, honestly, I would have loved to have been surprised.
Yes.
And it comes back and says, oh, yeah, we're all in on citizen development. Guess what? We've got very strict governance and control here because the most powerful tool we need to. Yeah, we didn't think that was going to happen, and it didn't. And again,
I think that's probably, if you think about the parts of the organization who are tasked with building the systems of governance, and then you look at the parts of the organization who are concerned with systems of development, one is running very much ahead of the other one all of the time. Now we're seeing it now with these tools. if you're going back 10, 12 years ago, it was enterprise file sync and share stuff that was running way outside, and then compliance was coming along around and getting very excited about it and saying, we can't have this. People will use tools long before anybody who can set a rule whether you can and you can't use a tool. That's not a surprise.
No, it's not a surprise. But I mean, but the concern is if you turn the clock way back, like 2 decades back, you know, one of the problems with business intelligence tools, right, was that, oh, it looked great, oh, it's great, and it turned out you were actually pulling data from the wrong places and generating incorrect reports, right? So then, in many organizations, there was a bit of a clampdown, right? Basically, I'm cancelling your licenses. I only want somebody who knows what they're doing using it. My fear is, well, if you could do that damage with a BI tool, which, come on, what was it really? Yeah, it was pretty simple by today's technology standards, right? What could you do with AI? Mamma mia, right?
Well, indeed. Yeah. Well, that's a kind of chilling vision of things to come, or chilling vision of things already in place. Will have to be our kind of ending point as we've hit our time limit today. Thanks for visiting and listening to us this time. And I'm sorry that my docking station had a 20-second kind of fit in the middle of this and we lost me. But anyway, next time, 3 more topics, 30 minutes, but with me and Alan and Dan all on at the same time for our 2024 prediction special. So hopefully you can join us for that one. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.